Good. Hello. Welcome. This is the International Dagger Symposium. The International Dagger Symposium usually consists of Björn, me, and whoever we get to talk to us, which we seem to be doing something right with because we are joined again by Predrag. We haven't scared him off yet. But there are two new faces as well. Well, they have had those faces for a while, I guess, but they're new to us, which are Kyle and Ola. And if someone's new to the International Dagger Symposium, of course, we ask them, why daggers though? Kyle, do you want to start to tell us about your dagger journey?
So my dagger journey started about 10 years ago when I started training Filipino martial arts. I was real big into studying like Jeet Kune Do under the Inosanto line, and one of the big things they brought up was like holes in systems. So like if you were a striker and you didn't have wrestling, that's a major hole. Well, if you're an unarmed fighter and you don't know how to fight against a knife or a machete, that could be a major gap in your martial arts. So I started training it through that, and then I got into HEMA because everyone gets into HEMA for longsword because that's what we all get in here for. And then what I noticed is that people did dagger and they did not fight very well, especially in competitions in our area. So I decided to do a deep dive into the resources that were like on Wiktenauer or any of the books that I could get a hold of as a way of viewing each of the sources kind of like puzzle pieces. And if I put enough of them together, I could see what the whole looked like. And being able to use some of my own background of things that, well, since we are all human beings with two arms, two legs, and some of these universal mechanics would fill in the gaps. And so that's kind of how my journey has been going. And then I decided to make instructionals and stuff after a while because I wanted to increase, rising tide raises all ships. And it's not a lot. There's a lot of misconception and fears about dagger fighting. I mean, not only in HEMA, but in other places, people think it's either too brutal, too unsafe. And sometimes they basically turn it into itty bitty rapier, or they turn it into one-handed punching matches. So that's kind of been my journey, is just trying to spread the love in my region and others for dagger, because that's kind of the redheaded stepchild of HEMA, because it includes so much grappling and so much close quarters work that a lot of people don't know about and didn't sign up to sword fighting to get into.
Yeah. And maybe we will talk about the question of why people get this feeling of this being so brutal during today's topic. But before we dive into that, Ola, what's your dagger story, your dagger journey?
Well, my main background in knife fighting is from maga. It was more the thing in the 90s than it is now. Then I met Björn and we started training a bit. And almost at the same time, we saw some videos on YouTube, people fighting with daggers. And it was not all things that we had done. So the question was, why the actual... Yeah. So I became Björn's punching bag, more or less. So that's a background. And now we're in the same fencing club, so that's the background.
Yeah. So basically, for those who have watched previous episodes, that story might sound familiar because it's your story as well. So you've been in episode number 1, and you're back for this one, which is great. Today's topic is as a continuation on last session's topic of the physical peculiarities of dagger fighting. Today we're talking about the psychological peculiarities of dagger fighting, like how does it feel different, how does it what does it do to our minds that's different from, for example, longsword fighting, which we have learned that Kyle brings a professional side to this discussion as a trained mental health psychologist, mental health therapist. That's the term.
Mental health counselor.
mental health counselor. Good. So if at any point any one of us feel uncomfortable talking about the studies, he might help us. But all of us, of course, have experienced that firsthand, being practitioners and instructors of Dagger. And I think it is a topic that is very important to talk about, because if we want to practice it, and especially if we want to instruct on the topic, we should know what we are doing with people's insights, not just how we stab into them, but also how we affect them. So, Predrag, as you've been awfully quiet until now, what do you think feels different about dagger fighting than other weapon systems?
It's the close proximity of the weapon. In wrestling, I can relax. I can just go, okay, I'll see how I feel, because I'm in close contact all the time, and I feel what the other person is doing, so I can react to it. Just my body is moving because the other person is moving. Longsword, it's a little further away, so I do have some more time, except the opponent is a little bit faster than I am. But with Dagger, it's he's already quite close to me, so for me it's always, I know I will be stabbed, I will be hurt if I go to Dagger fight, because I have to really execute the techniques perfectly well to really get out of it. If it's really the other guy's in for the kill, if it's just for play, okay, I can do it. But if they're really going for it, and with the medieval dagger, so really with strength, brute force, and so on, to puncture things and hurt me, then I always tell my pupils, you will have to accept that you will not get out of it unfazed. You will have some blemishes on you. Even if you win, the chance that you will be not wounded is quite low. And so that's a thing that for me is closing the distance, because it's already close and you have the dagger inside. So for the dagger fighting, you have to get close sometimes, quite often actually, for the techniques to work. And that's the point, getting into the distance that you need without the fear of, or without the hesitation of, oh God, there's a dagger inside. And so that's one thing that's for me the psychological aspect, and that's what you have to teach people. Our usual reaction to a dagger is stepping away. Longsword, I am further away. With a staff weapon, I am further away usually, so it feels safer. It's not necessarily, but it feels safer because the distance is more there. And with the dagger, well, and the person can hide it, so he can step in front of you and you don't see the dagger, and somehow you stab because you were expecting a punch and it was stabbed.
So it's at least a perceived threat that is
Yes.
higher than that of a longsword, even though that would, if you just talk about it, seems counterintuitive, because one is like this huge thing and the other one is like, right? But it's perceived as more threatening, maybe because of the proximity of it. Ola, would you agree with that? Is it just being close? Does it feel more threatening?
Definitely. When it comes to knives, daggers, it's close, dirty, personal. It's the end of the line. You can't go nowhere. That's the end of it. That's my feelings about the knife.
Björn, would you, as someone using Ola as a punching bag regularly, do you have something to add to that? Are you getting close and stabbing him all the time?
I think I don't experience that necessarily. Ola has this reaction when I train with him, but
That's not good to start with.
I have several times experienced, I think, 2 or 3 things that I have had to work with, and that have kind of influenced how I at least teach and try to bring dagger across. Because in the beginning, when I got around, when I was going into HEMA and I got to spar with people. First of all, a lot of very, very competent fencers are extremely uncomfortable about being grabbed or by being that close. I have several instances of people who are, with any form of longer sword would easily, handle me with no, but somehow manages to freeze up completely when there's a dagger and somebody grabs you. And I think that, for example, like Ola, he held a workshop with the takedowns or with the falling, and an excellent fencer. He became like a wooden log. He was completely unable to move. And this is just by falling, because the prospects of falling was so daunting. And I think it's partly that, and also the fact that where with a sword, you, like Predrag was kind of touching upon, with a sword you can go in, get a clean hit, block and get out. And this is rarely the case with a dagger. You kind of, this old Filipino slogan about expect to get cut. Well, there's something in it, even though perhaps in those terms it might be exaggerated. But my point is that if quite often when you get cut, I will grab and go in further and continue to stab, and this is something that makes people uncomfortable. Isn't there some statistics that you have mentioned, Ola, about the different cuts and how many stabs you can take or something?
The statistics say about 5 to 7 stabs from a knife. That means some people will survive 20, and some people will die from 1. But that's the median. 5 to 7 stabs, you will survive most of the time.
And this statistics is from where? Just to
Israel, mainly. Some from Great Britain, and I think United States.
That's the data they used. That's where they are from. All right. So and if you train to that, you have this kind of relentlessness as an attacker that might not be found in a long sword system. You just hit and retreat, and you just stay in there, stay in that space. All right.
Yes, and I'm sorry, just 2 seconds, just to finish it off. So this is why, for example, if I get hit once, I will try to hit immediately, maybe 5 times, to escalate, because okay, I maybe will survive this one, but now I have to finish it, so I will give you 5, and that that intensity and that feeling is somehow foreign to many people. Sorry, now I'm done.
So, Kyle, you as a professional, do you in what we have described so far, do you find any points that you would say, like, you can see this is actually what this is about, this is what is creating all of this?
So I would say it's part of expectation management, because if I go, let's say I show up to a HEMA class, and in our area it's stereotypical, you're going to do long sword, and so I'm expecting to hold a sword and fight, and I learn to fight from a distance, and it's almost like a version of tag. Now suddenly I'm going to take this game that you were expecting to play of tag, and now I'm going to turn into a boxing match. And it completely changes people's expectations of what they're into, and when their expectations are changed like that, the anxiety meter is going to jump up. And from a psych of sports perspective, the 3 areas of psychological arousal: green, 85% of us do really good in the green whenever there's no stakes, it's really low key. About 10 to 15 do really well in the yellow, which is there are some stakes, but it's not life or death, and only about 5-ish percent of the population do really well under like life and death extreme pressure. Those are usually your Olympic athletes or your people who are really good in like combat situations. So you have somebody who, because of the size of like a longsword or even like I love doing halberd, but since it's bigger, even though it's moving fast, in comparison to how fast I can move my hand, which is how fast a dagger can move, it still moves slow. It has to move through space. And so my expectations of timing, it's bigger, so it's easier to see. All of that goes from something about yay tall on me to now something that is basically yay big, so it's the size of my forearm, and it's at boxing speed. And so now something's moving in on me that fast. It's a for some people it's a huge jump psychologically to go from those two different speeds. And yet again, as I took second in my first tournament I went to, and I made the joke I'd only been training seriously for like 3 to 4 months, and essentially I won with pommeling people, so I just turned my sword fighting into boxing, and no one showed up for a boxing match. Everyone showed up for a longsword match, and just by throwing people off their game, I was able to get second to only the other guy at my school who trained longer and knew my skills, so he knew what to do. And since people don't train it, it becomes a hole in their game. They don't have expectations. The only expectations they've heard is from other people who can wildly exaggerate what happens. And so there becomes a built-in fear there. And also, of all the things we train, it's the number one that we still see people die due to nowadays with regular frequency. So we don't have a connection to watching someone die or hearing on the news someone dying of like halberd or arquebuses, or we have a concept of what a knife death looks like. So we have an image in our head of what a knife fight would be like, and so for some people it cranks that anxiety up way high, and so it's big detriment to their training.
So the way that I understand the first part that you were explaining is basically this feeling of this is a threatening situation might come from me basically being feeling helpless. I'm not prepared for this. This isn't like I don't know what to do, and that's of course like making me way more anxious than okay, I have a basic understanding of what's going to happen. So that would be the first aspect, if I understand correctly.
Right, because if I don't have, I know what to do in this situation. You've taken me out of that, and you've put me in another situation where I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, how I'm supposed to respond. So that's where the anxiety would come from.
And the second one is basically by association, because with sword fights, I see people fight with swords all the time, and all of them are still alive and making new movies, right? So, but then the dagger thing, I can like imagine being in a situation like that and being threatened. So it's way more real. All right. A thing that has been mentioned a few times that I would like to get back on is the proximity of the weapon. Predrag has mentioned it, Björn mentioned it, the proximity and the grappling aspect of it, which kind of makes it distinct from most of the other stuff we have in HEMA aside from the wrestling. Why is that such an issue? Is it just because we are not prepared for it, as Kyle has put it, or is there something else like intrinsic to this close distance that's kind of making stuff feel more threatening? Björn, what would you say?
I think that yes. For example, if you look at there was a video that surfaced maybe 3-4 years ago or something about somebody did actually a quite nice takedown, I'd say, in a fencing competition, a longsword competition, and somebody basically did a good takedown, and the guy was really pommeled down with it, and it looked like he was almost knocked out. It turned out actually he wasn't, but a lot of people were like, at least on the internet. So of course, things always look more serious on the internet. When you speak to people, it tends to be a little bit more more nuanced. But let's say that it was the amount of people who were like, oh, it should be forbidden to do takedowns, for example. Well, the reason is that they don't train it. And when you don't train something, then how can you be prepared for it? I think this is one of the things. But also the fact that a lot of people today are actually unused to being held or being grabbed. Ola, haven't you talked about this in a professional capacity once?
People don't want to be held. They don't want to be close. They don't want to fight close. The seasoned fighters have no problem getting into a good distance. The amateurs, the ones that has no experience, they get really uncomfortable when they get into the actual hitting distance. So getting close, getting grabbed, actually you get offended when someone grabs you. It's really problematic in my work.
Yeah.
Because
Björn
people
has mentioned-
are willing to fight. As I grab them, they're willing to fight with the fists.
Björn has mentioned the professional view on that. Would you state what that profession is, so we can like a sort?
I'm working security as a bouncer at nightclubs.
All right. So, and you notice a distinct change in people's behavior when you grab them or when someone is being grabbed. That's kind of
Yeah, definitely. A fight should be as in the movies, at some distance, not close, not personal, not hurting at all. And you should win always.
Of course. Like we're all the protagonists, right? So it's like that. Predrag, when we talked about the connections of wrestling and Dagger in our first episode, we already pointed out that you do lots of grappling, of wrestling. What's your perspective on the whole touching? I don't want to put it as what's your perspective on touching people. Like, what is your perspective? Is that a very is that something that puts people into a special headspace, basically, like being grabbed, being held?
Yes. There's also a gender issue about that. Man and woman training together. I was 20 years ago, I started doing wrestling classes in our club because our head trainer, instructor couldn't come. And so he asked me, oh, do something. I said, okay, I'll do some wrestling stuff. Oh, yeah, do that. And so I had 20 people around there and a lot of women. And they were really uncomfortable to train with another man. Some of those were not so uncomfortable with training with me, strangely enough. But it was like, oh, no, he's coming too close to me. And it's asserting some form of dominance in a way if I hold somebody. And if I don't know how to get out of it or can defend myself against, that's really terrifying for a lot of people, or at least gets them the anxiety. So, oh God, and the stress level rises up and they freeze. And so then you have some pointy thing in the hand, and the other person also has it. And I also feel that if somebody is really dominant and I'm training, and then they manage to grab my hand, my dagger hand, and now I have to defend against their dagger hand and it's already close to me, so I don't have a lot of time and space to defend, and that's really where I feel like, okay, now my blood pressure is rising high, and I'm really trying to, survive. You get into fight and flight mode, and so that's why, for example, in my wrestling classes in my club, there were never that many people. Well, sometimes there were, but most of the times there were not that many people because it was something people were joining HEMA for longsword, yes, or sword, rapier, whatever, stuff like that. Apart from me and some of you, I think, who were just more close and personal. But so if somebody gets into your space, your private space, that's a violation. A longsword, you're still far off. So when I'm training longsword with other people or sparring, for a long time I was one of the only people who really got in close and did some wrestling stuff. And a lot of people couldn't cope with that because I was getting into their space. They were, what's he doing? Why is he doing that? is he allowed that? And so the same is with the dagger, because okay, yeah, I have something in my hand and I try to, oh, he's blocking me, he's grabbed me, he's getting hold of me, controlling me. As we're talking about, what's the difference between wrestling and the other thing? So it's the control. I can't do as I want to, and the other person is really close and has something in their hand, in their free hand, that might hurt me. And I think that's that's a thing that you have to overcome, and what really people don't like. And I think a lot of people really are not used to being touched, because it's not something we do. We learn in school and so on, and kindergarten beforehand, even in a way that, or rather, we don't learn to respond to that as well. Yeah.
Have you experienced people getting panic attacks
Yes. Yes.
while you grab them?
Yeah.
They started a fight, you grab them, they get a panic attack, can't breathe. First times I thought they were faking it. They were not.
Yeah.
It happens.
That's like, I think there's two things in there that I would like to have the professional perspective on. The one is the kind of the personal bubble that you kind of hear people talk about, like, get out of my personal space, my personal bubble. So I would be interested in like how much of an actual psychological thing is that? Is that an actual thing, or is it just something that people have? Is that just a term that people coined? And the other thing is the fight or flight reflex, and maybe is it even worse because I'm kind of taking the flight away from you there by holding you, which is kind of what Ola was getting at in the end. So these are like the two things I would like to hear Kyle's perspective on.
So personal space, or the personal bubble, is, for the most part, it is a cultural item that we are born into. So like in Western culture, essentially, your personal bubble is if you extend your hand out and you go in a circle, that's roughly the bubble, right? I've had friends from South America, and in Brazil, Peru, they don't have that kind of bubble because they're used to being closer to each other. So whenever they would talk, it would be like right here. And I would take a step back and they would take a step forward, because they're used to so many people being around, more close quarters, that kind of thing. So for them, the ability to deal with people being in their space was much easier for them. So like we did a dance class at the college I was at, or we did wrestling or anything like that, they were perfectly fine because they were already used to people being close to them, touching them, all of that. So yet going back to kind of that expectation, we're not used to it, and we haven't been exposed to it. So like, you didn't do wrestling or any type of physical activity in school that required you to touch each other. You just are not used to people just walking into your space and occupying it. So that's an initial anxiety trigger. Is like, I'm losing control of what's happening here, and going to that fight or flight reflex, because there's fight, obviously, there's flight, there's freeze, there's fugue, and there's dissociate. So if I am in a situation where I do not view that I can fight, I would flee. If fleeing is taken away from me, we have to freeze at that point. So I'm just going into a frozen mode of like, oh God, I can't move because I can't fight, I can't run, I'm overwhelmed at this point, and my body is going into that hourglass mode of wait, see what happens, slow down, don't move, as a way of like a predator response. So it's very easy for people to get in that situation whenever you take them very suddenly into an area of complete and utter unknown to them. And for a lot of people, like it was saying, like, oh, I expect to get hit by a sword. I don't expect to, as I turn to cut them, suddenly they ripped my arm down, and now I'm falling on the ground, and I'm like, oh, well, this is something I would associate as an accident. Now they're continuing to attack me. Whoa, what are the rules of engagement here? I'm not understanding this. Where are the flamethrowers coming from? Is that a dinosaur? Like, they're just out of their element so badly that their brain can't handle it, and so they freeze up. That's why a lot of people, whenever I just got back from California doing grappling, the first thing we teach everyone is how to fall down, because if you don't know how to fall down, you can't grapple. Because as soon as you load someone and go to throw, they turn into that wooden dummy, and when that wooden dummy hits the floor, it breaks in pieces. So we have to, it's an exposure and a training problem from my perspective, because like we don't differentiate between grappling and dagger fighting at our school at Symbrogi. They occupy the same space. So if you're learning grappling techniques, you always learn them in the context of that there's a knife present. So something you would normally get.
For everyone interested in that, watch the first episode of the International Dagger Symposium.
Oh, good. Yeah, so like, because it changes the game. Because if you're used to, like, I've done different types of grappling, submission grappling, and some, like I do catch wrestling and I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're both submission wrestling, but one emphasizes the use of pain and restricting the breathing and putting people, the holds alone are the submissions, where this one is more gentle in the fact that you're like not driving your elbow into someone's sternum or dropping your knee on their neck and holding it as a way of putting them in a panic state so that they then give you something. So it's or famously, one of the Gracies said, when you have someone on their back that's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, as soon as you punch them, they drop down a belt, and if you keep hitting them, they'll eventually be back down to a white belt because you've taken them out of their game so badly that now they can't do what they know they normally need to do.
So that was like the first three. We have fight or flight, which most people have heard of. Then there's the freeze one. What were the other two that we might encounter?
Fugue or dissociate. Fugue is whenever somebody starts to have an out-of-body experience.
All right.
So like they will describe like I was watching myself and my body was like on autopilot and doing things, but I had no control over it. Typically, you would see that in like someone who's been assaulted. Their brain will kind of like exit for a little bit. And dissociate. Go ahead.
How do you spell fugue?
Fague.
Okay. Right. Yes. Go on.
And then like dissociate is whenever you basically, the best way to describe it is it's almost like you're asleep because the top part of your brain has been so overwhelmed it basically goes into shutdown mode, and you're no longer present, and your body could still be doing things, but you are not present at that moment, and so things can continue on. But that's because the more you put someone under stress, the brain goes into survival mode, and it doesn't have to think to survive. It can just claw, scream, bite, run, whatever.
Yeah, like it's redirecting energy to more important sectors, basically, than consciousness.
Yeah, that's why most people, whenever they're in a situation that's very threatening, they don't remember it, because you don't need to make memories to survive. You just need to be down the road further than the bear is.
And there's no need for memories if you die, like
Exactly.
waste energy. So what's the difference between that one and disassociation then?
In fugue states, you are still conscious that you're doing things. In dissociation, you're not conscious at all.
All right. So it's like this sort of blackout.
People would say if I blacked out, things went red. I don't remember anything, but they were still doing things.
All right, so that's a disassociation, and fugue is where you kind of like watching
out of body, watching yourself, or like I've experienced it where it's like the easiest way to put it is, have you ever been driving somewhere and then suddenly you were closer to it, and you're like time just kind of skipped on you?
Yeah,
that is a dissociation.
Like, phased out for a bit, like.
Yeah. So that would be the easiest dissociation to think of. Or if you were in a tournament, you were fighting hardcore, and then you don't remember any of the fight because your brain was under so much stress that you basically were dissociating and going into into your like zone at that point. Fugue is where things stop feeling real, and like for myself, I've experienced it in massive anxiety, where it's like suddenly everything feels like I'm watching a movie, and everything that's happening just doesn't seem real, and it kind of feels like I'm watching myself do things. And people who are put under a lot of anxiety because you've taken them out of their comfort zone that far will just kind of move a lot more like this. So
So if I may comment on the last part, I think that there's I once
So
I think I've turned it 101.
we need to know what effects we have with what we're doing, right? And not just because everyone talks about the physiological side. We all talk about, but if I stab someone here, how long will he last? Oh, how many stabs can a person survive? But people don't often talk about like how does it feel, what's happening. And that's the most real aspect of the wall, if you think about it, because that's what we really encounter in our classes, because people really get uncomfortable when getting touched or getting out of their comfort zone or being held when they want to flee. They rarely get stabbed in classes, I hope.
so
Even,
so can I comment on this a little bit?
yeah, sure.
So, first of all, I think that I have several things that I made mental notes. So, first of all, I think that Kyle's comment about the culture thing is very interesting, and I think maybe in the medieval in medieval Europe, the social distancing, if you like, was a lot less, was a lot smaller, especially if you lived in a urban area. If you look at streets and stuff, I mean, they're obviously just smaller. And I think for us Scandinavians, it's even worse because, you know, we had the social distancing of 2 meters. And then when it was finally over, we said we can now revert to our usual 5 meters. This is the Scandinavian mentality. We're perfectly comfortable that you're somewhere over there. I can barely see you.
From your neighbors. What neighbors? Yeah.
Exactly. No, but what I wanted to talk about was that exactly this disassociation and fugue state. Uh, I think that there was I was at a lecture once about how method acting and and possession, as in the being possessed by spirits, is indistinguishable clinically. If you take a psychologist in and they are going to assess them, they wouldn't be able to know one from the other unless they had, you know, the anamnesis and you know, the background of the person. But just watching it in an isolated, out of context situation, they are indistinguishable. And and I have a theory that this is kind of why you see this, where you have all this idea of the berserkers, that this is you gestalt is the word, I think, to a character, a animal, if you like. And you can see this in Southeast Asia. They have these animal possession rituals that they do for fighting still, where it's both useful because you can the animal, the bear or the tiger or whatever you think you're becoming, can do things that you might have moral implications against actually doing, but also and this is, I think, also part of the fugue or disassociation state. It creates a buffer for you when you get out, because what you did might have been something that is terrible. It is something that you would have a hard time reconciling yourself with, and if it was you might get PTSD. But if it was the tiger or the bear or the owl or whoever it was, then you can somehow create a buffer and saying that no, it wasn't me, it was that guy. And so I think, and this is, I think, connected to how, well, you have to correct me on this, Kyle, because you probably know more about it, but there was like this study in the U.S. Army about after the Vietnam War, or was it the Second World War, where they found out a very low percentage of their soldiers were actually shooting at the enemy. Most of them were like shooting at the air, and you know, we found like muskets from the Civil War that been loaded like 6 or 7 times because they didn't actually fire them. Because when lots of people fire at the same time, it's hard to see if you're actually firing. So people don't want to hurt other people. This is intrinsic in our humanity somehow, and creating ways of dealing with that is somehow important, especially if you're going into not just dealing with it in a Fechtskole or Sal context, but actually going to war. This is something that is, yeah. Am I on the right track, Kyle?
So I cannot remember the name of the man you're quoting, but I have researched him, and his research is very bad. So, but the reality is that it is when it, the research that I've seen people have done in order to train soldiers in order to fight, at least in the U.S. I'm not sure other places. I just know where I'm from. Is if my goal is to teach you to kill another person, that is very hard to do. But if I train you to protect another person, particularly somebody you like, you will kill another person easier because to kill someone else with purpose, it's kind of a natural instinctive reaction that's murder, which is the name we give it. So we all kind of like, ooh, like, no, I want to do that. But it's like defending someone else, though, now it helps me overcome that boundary. So like the idea of taking on the aspect of I am now no longer myself. I am now whatever entity, archetype, whatever is possessing me. It allows me to get over that barrier, that initial hump, in order to commit violence. So it's in the defense of something, people are more likely to pull the trigger on it than if I'm just going out of my way to hurt somebody, which kind of ties back to kind of Meyer's idea of like, we're training martially to defend our city and defend our whatever. It's not an attack, it is a defense. It is the art of defense. So allowing me to like overcome that barrier of I have to go over and like contain, kill, whatever this person, it needs to be more psychologically in the defense of. But there are people who hit situations where that fight or flight can't run, so they just shoot all other directions. That can happen, but not as much as the guy you were mentioning kind of documented. He was the reason like they find 6 shots stabbed up on it is because the frizzen isn't properly going off or the dill, so it happens. But there wasn't really any good research on that. But people tend not to want to kill each other unless it's in the defense of another. That's why they always say you don't do it for you, you do it for the guy in the foxhole next to you. So that's why like the idea of like I'm going to fight you with a knife that's the size of my forearm and I'm going to have to kill you is like you're going to only do that if it's to save your butt or someone else. Not something you usually do on a Friday night. Not at least in my parts.
Hopefully not.
And it's interesting because you can still see that, like in modern days, it's never the ministry of going somewhere and killing people. It's the ministry of defense, right? It's always like in German, it's die Bundeswehr. So it's like the Wehr aspect is like protecting, defending. So we've kind of made a transition now from the psychology of the person being attacked, because that's what we kind of intuitively started with. Like, why is it so uncomfortable? Why does it feel threatening? Why does it feel bad in that way? To the psychology of the attacker, basically. Like, I am doing stuff to people, but I am doing stuff to people with a longsword or a rapier as well. Why does this feel different? Is it kind of just the same mechanism? Is it just empathy? Am I just empathizing with the other person? Or are there other reasons why it feels weird to take this so close to another person's face?
So if I was to throw something out there, it's the difference between like if I throw a bullet via the gun, I shoot it over there and hit somebody, I might register that I hit them or I watch them fall down. But if I punch you in the gut, I can hear you. I can see there's a direct 1-to-1 correlation that if I stabbed you with a wooden dagger and I broke your collarbone in training, it's right there. It's not like I hit you at distance, because I've hit people with longsword before. You back off to kind of move and they kind of go, there's a delay, versus I just hit you. I threw you to the ground. I caused the damage. I saw it in your eye. I heard you. I held your weight.
Oops, we lost Kyle. Oh no! Oh, you're back. Good.
What was the last thing I said?
You were talking about breaking people's collarbones.
Oh yes. So when you're that close, there's too many senses involved that people are not used to. You can hear them. You can feel them. You're bearing their weight. You're resisting their strength. It's all a lot of sensory info that you don't get whenever you're a meter or two away using a weapon that you kind of tag somebody and there might be a delay in it.
So it's just more like more direct, more personal, instead of basically being mediated by this object in my hand.
Yeah. I am the direct cause of your pain and suffering versus, oh no, my sword did it.
Okay, which kind of ties back to the first episode again, where we talked about the main difference being like, I am directly controlling your body as opposed to like I'm controlling your weapon with my weapon, and it's like something.
But also perhaps the realism part of it, because this is the size of my kitchen knife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a kitchen knife about this size. I should, of course, be prepared and have my kitchen knife ready here, but I don't. But it's more or less the size of a large kitchen knife. So this is something that feels real. People have it in their homes. And statistically, kitchen knives, at least in Europe, are the absolute big killers. That's what people die from. There's not the stilettos, or the spring knives and everything that the governments want to regulate from you. They show up almost never in the statistics. The statistics
Maybe
are kitchen
because
knives.
they're regulated, but
Maybe, but also a knife this big is completely unregulated. It's everywhere. It's very available, but it's also very, very useful for killing people. I mean, if I had a pocket knife or I have this, I think it's pretty obvious which one I would, if I had to be stabbed by one of them, I'd take the pocket knife over this one. So I think that there might be a condition of realism, that daggers feel more real. The likelihood of you actually getting attacked by a sword on the street. I mean, it
or attacking
can.
someone, if we're sticking to the attacker's perspective.
Yes.
Well,
Regardless.
with the sword happened in Germany quite a few times in the last year. I think it wasn't used 3 or 4 times, some even around my place here in Offenbach. So it happens quite often. It's katana, so it's not really a sword; it's something else. Well, it's a knife. It's a messer actually. By German comparison.
But it's a good thing we regulated against shuriken. So
yes, and I think just about 6-7 weeks ago. So swords are becoming more prominent with that part. People getting swords and so on, and robbing gas stations. That's what happened 3 or 4 years ago in Offenbach. So everybody asked us, which one of you was it? So we said, no, it wasn't us.
katana.
I would have. No, I think it was even a longsword at that time. So it could have been us, but we said, no. For me, it's more the dagger thing. So I'm off the hook. But I think a lot of people really, and we have that at my school where I work. The knife is the thing that you take with you if you want to threaten somebody, because you can keep it in your pocket, in your backpack, and just show it to the person. Say, look what I have here in my backpack. Happened quite a few times in the last few years in my school. And we found out the person got kicked from school, so it was shit for them. But the fear is there, because you can never see the knife. The longsword, you can hardly conceal that easily. Yeah, you have a long coat with yourself, so yeah, and big enough, so yes. But it will be more easily recognizable. But the dagger or a knife, pocket knife, or whatever the knife is, you can conceal it. Oh yeah, I had it with me because yesterday I was doing some what's it called, wood cutting, and yeah, I forgot it in my backpack. I heard this excuse quite a lot of times from my kids, and actually I quite often believe them. But sometimes, yeah, with some of the kids I don't. And so that's, I think, one of the things about the fear of the dagger or the knife is you will never know when a knife's going to show up. There was once a documentation or an experiment in Frankfurt. They were filming it, about some people playing Nazis, and they were going into a subway train and harassing people racially. So yeah, and so on. And everybody was moving away from them, except for one guy. I don't know where he was from, some Eastern Europe or rather, no, Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, I think. And he was sitting right next to them, and suddenly he had a big kitchen knife in his hand, and he was really thinking about killing these two guys. And in the end, they could calm him down and said, no, this is just, there's the camera, so we're filming that. That's an experiment and so on. We want to see if people will react and help. But it was really a life-threatening situation because the guy was suddenly, out of nowhere, having a big knife like that in his hand. And you see that on the film. So they didn't cut it out. So it really, and he would have killed them. He was really prepared to defend somebody. So that's what you said. Getting people to defend somebody, themselves or somebody else, will get them to kill people or at least hurt them. And
For whatever reason.
yeah, for whatever reason. He had the feeling that person was harassed or maybe even in danger. And so he had to step in. And the knife, yeah, was a kitchen knife. He could have just bought it from somewhere. Maybe he really had bought it just and said, oh, I got it with me. So, okay, I can defend myself.
So it is a way more prevalent thing. It's just like, as we said in the beginning, it's just there at the back of our mind. When I touch a knife, this is something that I could just come across in a lethal context in real life, but at any point. Like, someone could just have a knife. You don't just run across people or situations where you go like, someone could have a knife. Like, it's way less. Yeah. They're way fewer in numbers. Let's put it that way. So if I look at it that way, if I say, okay, from the person being attacked, like from the recipient's point of view in a Dagger class, there are certain things like people are getting in my space, people are restricting my movement, I feel helpless, I feel anxious, I'm just way out of my depth, I don't know what to do. And on the other hand, as an attacker, we have this thing of like, I'm doing something that's like, this is like not what I should be doing, from like for different reasons, and of course I can tell a bit more and so on. So there seems to be a lot of things that we need to keep in mind when doing Dagger, when teaching Dagger, that we might not necessarily have to keep in mind when teaching longsword or the handle or port stuff. And Björn wants to add.
Yes, actually, I want Ola to add something. Probably. No, referring to what Predrag talked about earlier about women being more uncomfortable about it, because I think that their association about people invading their private space has another association. I mean, it's associated with assault. And Ola, you were doing this. You were at some seminar for self-defense for women, where the female instructors there's a group in your krav maga class that's doing this. Can you tell something about, because I think it's related to this somehow?
What do you want to know?
No, but I remember we talked about this afterwards, and you said that what they talked about was like what the boundaries and what people were, because it's hard. I cannot, I can imagine, but I cannot know what somebody I am not is experiencing or feeling. So I've never been in that situation. For me, that isn't something that happens.
Yeah, I had to be the attacker in one of these instances. The attacker in this case was me moving closer from different angles, talking to the girl. I didn't know her from before. She's an instructor now, but I didn't know her then. And she had to grade her experience from which angle I came and how close I came to her. And that's something we as men, I suppose, never will understand. Her grading scale was so off what I would ever have thought. She felt threatened by me. We were in the same class, but I was told by the instructor, talk to her like this, at this distance, say these words. And getting close to her, she felt the distance that was too close was about 3 or 4 meters when I talked to her. That was definitely too close. She wanted to run away. I was told to catcall her and so on. I think that's a dimension we as men will never experience.
Yeah, I think Björn, do you want to tie that
No.
in with what has been
Oh,
said?
yeah, but I think that's just the dimension that was, since Predrag brought it up, and we don't have Karin here, which would otherwise have provided the in-person experience, of course. So I thought it was an interesting. I only remembered pieces of this conversation, but I knew I had it with Ola at the time because he was very surprised at this, and I think this is one of the reasons that this is something we have to think about. And at least for me, I've because I want more people to fence with daggers. I want daggers to be, as I said before, in danger of sounding like an American politician. I want daggers to be great again. Yes. So so in order to do that, we have to make daggers not less uncomfortable. And this has kind of been the last 2-3 years. I've spent a lot of time on how to make fencing with a dagger not uncomfortable for anyone. And still, I don't think I'm completely there, but I think I've come away there. But it's a constant progression because this was my first experience. Everybody thought it was extremely uncomfortable. People say it's uncomfortable to spar you, or it's uncomfortable to fence you, because I always want to do daggers and yeah.
Yeah, and this is kind of where my segue kind of was supposed to lead. Like we've talked about what's kind of going on in people's heads. Now what do we do with it? Like, how do we deal with training a weapon or teaching a weapon that makes people way more uncomfortable than other weapons do because of more realistic associations, because of like entering your personal space, because of restricting your movement, exerting control directly over you, because of all the reasons that we've talked about. Like, how do we make people still like, and I think on the one hand it would be wrong to teach the dagger as something that's not brutal at all, and it's not like threatening at all, because like it's in the sources call it like brutal, and like they already like they can have like 20 pages of like people hacking at each other with long swords, and then they go, these two fight with the dagger, God have mercy on their souls, right? So it has this reputation like since its original historical roots. But we want to still have people to teach it. We don't want to have people go like, this is fucked up, I'm out. We want people to go like, all right, this is like this, that's the historical context, let's have fun playing with it like we could do with all the other weapons, right? Because they have been weapons of murder as well. So how would we go about it? And I think Predrag has mentioned that he has developed maybe one or two hints or tips on how to do that?
Well, one of the things is in our club we start slowly, so it's just okay getting the feel for the distance, for and doing it in their own time, so they can really we try that, we go for this one first, try to do the steps to reach me, and the other person is just going away, maybe stepping in. So the defending party is also learning to manage the distance, and that it's not always the best to go away, but sometimes to step forward, and doing some plays with that so that they can have a joyful experience with Dagger in the beginning, and always try to get the fun inside. That's at least for me, it's always important to if you stab somebody, at least make a joke about it, or if you are stabbed, say laugh about it and say, "Yeah, that was great, fun. Now one more time because I'm still alive." Um, so and you have to look at, because now sometimes even the girls in our club, new girls, say, "Oh, I would like to have a look at Dagger. Could you teach us some Dagger stuff?" And that's where we try to really go into it slow, and so show them, because in the end, if you look at the treaties, it was starting out. If you go dueling, you have the spear, then the sword, and then the dagger. The dagger is the end, as Ola, I think Ola said, dagger is the end, and yeah, end of the line, except for wrestling, but that's it's still dagger in a way, or dagger's wrestling. But go into for the fun thing first, and then look at what the people want to take out of it. If you have somebody who says, "Okay, that's enough for me at the beginning," then that's okay. Don't force them to go further, because then you'll just scare them off. But if they see other people going in further because they want to, if you have some experienced people showing them, "Okay, that's what we can do," and then those two laugh about it and say, "Yes, it is dirty, it's brutal, and you will be hit, but we're doing it in a spirit of, well, friendship, camaraderie in a way." So they will have a feeling, "Okay, I can try," and then they will try with experienced people or with friends, and but you have to make it safe. So we have these padded daggers, so that even if you stab somebody somewhere where it might hurt, it will not hurt as much. We train with fencing masks most of the times. Sometimes our advanced fences go with wooden daggers, no fencing mask, at full speed. And done that a few times, a long time ago, with medieval shoes on wet grass.
All right.
Both of us survived, and we got some really nice hits in, but we stopped because we knew exactly what we're doing. We could stop, we could really go in, we could defend, and that way all the things work, because we always say you go in with full energy, and actually the body of the opponent stops your thrust, not you yourself, but still you in the real time. But in the training you will stop, you will, because it's still somebody you like, hopefully. Otherwise you don't train with them. And so we gradually increase the stress level, and if they feel ready for it. Somebody says, "No, it's okay, I just want to have the basics and know how to move away maybe, or something, and have the feel for it," that's okay. And somebody says, "No, I want to have some more of it," and then and then we have quite a lot of time free sparring, and they can go in their own time. And quite often they choose one of the instructors. So, "Oh yeah, could we do it? And please," and so on. And then I say, "Okay, come with me with full energy," and so on. And I would just gradually increase my energy and my speed, so that they have first some success, and then they see, "Okay, so and now it feels more real," and so on. And they, most of the time they have fun.
All right. So it's basically easing them into the situation of people entering your personal space. That's one thing, but also
Yeah.
easing in this situation of which we talked about before, this kind of helplessness of my game. So like you first give them stuff to do, give them options, and then you kind of raise the stakes a bit so they don't feel that.
Yeah.
Go from
And I always say you're allowed to kick in the groin.
all right.
So always wear my cup, so they're always allowed to kick me in the groin if they want to.
So they have a way out, which lowers
Yes,
stakes.
they have a way out. I also do it if I have to, but most of the times they are allowed to do that with me, and that's okay.
Okay. Um, so this is one aspect that you mentioned aside from like with everything that we have talked about today. It's like, okay, like these are the effects that it has. make people get used to it, like slowly. You as you said, you can end with like doing like full intensity sparring on wet grass in medieval shoes. You can talk about how gruesome this weapon is and what the treaties say how brutal it is all the time, but that's not what you start with, right? At least if you want these people to come back, you want them to start feeling comfortable with the weapon, with the system, with the closeness, with everything, and then kind of build from there. But, and that's the other aspect of what you said, you want them to be comfortable like with the people around. Like if I trust you, I'm way more happy in getting grabbed and stuff. And maybe that's the reason why in your anecdotes from the beginning, people were more comfortable fighting against you than against the other guys because they just trusted you as an instructor. But maybe it's just also the way of what is the general atmosphere of my class. When I enter the room, like this kind of testosterone pit, or is this kind of like, oh, this guy is like making a silly face, they are making jokes, they're like they're hugging each other at the beginning of the class and stuff like that. So what's the general atmosphere that can like kind of frame the whole experience? I think that's a very important thing that has nothing directly to do with the mechanisms which we're talking about, which kind of looms behind it all and stuff. Very important thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
And just to top up, and also as an instructor, you have to look out if somebody is getting the testosterone level, and suddenly they just going stronger and stronger. With a lot of beginners, you have that, especially with men. Women most often really are more reserved, not all of them, but and with a lot of men, they want to show off, especially if there's women close by, and so that's where you have to stop them to say, okay, just to go slowly for it. Don't, yeah. And in the end, if you really see, okay, it doesn't work, okay, just have to say, please leave the hall. It's over for you today. Yeah, we will have to talk about that. But with anybody, so.
Yeah, we have mentioned like women several times in this episode. None of us is a woman. Just to make this clear, we are at this point, sadly, because none of the women in the loop in the group had time today. We are talking about women. We are not talking for women, and we are like not talking as women or whatever. Like, and we're not talking to women either. So at this point, it's like everything we say, like take it with a pinch of salt. It's just like from the things that we have noticed, from things that women have told us. But like it would be great to have a woman's perspective on this, because there surely are differences in like cultural things going on. Like I would probably get uncomfortable around Ola, not in like a 5 meter radius, but maybe when he just was very close to me. So just put this out there. Maybe we will have we will revert back to this topic at some point when some of the women in the group have time. But yeah, just to put that in there. So yeah, Björn, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, as of course both Ola, Predrag, and Jan probably know, my approach to this is to try to focus on the parts that isn't wrestling first. So essentially the parts that are most similar to other weapons. So, the whole building of entries and fencing, basically the fencing part that doesn't include grappling. First build that base and make them comfortable there, because I think that is so similar to like a messer, for example, a langes messer and a dagger. That part is quite similar, or a dusak maybe even more. So that is my approach. I basically build it as close to that as possible, and then I say, okay, so here is the entry to the grappling. But also am of the opinion that if you don't master this part, assuming that it is a dagger on dagger scenario, then you will never get to the grappling. If you meet somebody who's very competent at keeping the distance, it's not that difficult to not let your opponent in. So that's why that's also another reason for focusing on that. But actually, my main reason is for comfort, because I think people or most of my target audience is people who already are into HEMA. I'm not going out on the street trying to get people to say, "Oh, you want to learn how to stab people with daggers." You know, so this is how I approach it. I want this to be the focus first, and once you are comfortable with that, we can slowly integrate the other phases. And that is not, by the way, because I don't think that the grappling is integral or important to it. It's just that for psychological purposes or pedagogical purposes.
Target audience, HEMAists or HEMAistas.
Yes.
Pick them up where they are, basically. All right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we, at least whenever I'm training people at our school, we start everyone with wooden daggers. They primarily train with no mask, no gloves, no nothing. Pick speed up fast. Eventually, if we're doing something that we're going past 80%, we'll put a mask on at least. Gloves are optional. Our lessons we start at long range with daggers, so we do a lot more point up to start people with, because giving them that range, it's starting at a long range, almost like a boxing match, before we try to get them up close. But we always try to make sure you have your basic blocks and you have your basic strikes, and then after that, it's pair them up with somebody who is an instructor, or at least isn't going to have the machismo come out and try to win. And then it's here's gloves, here's mask, here's a wooden dagger. All right, you're gonna go play, and you're gonna go play with somebody. And sometimes we restrict it just to the mask, just as a way of, oh, you got tagged, and you're not getting horrible bruising throughout your body. But we kind of dump them into the deep end a little bit, because how to put it? I think when it comes to like daggers, wrestling, even if you're a halberd person, I love halberd. Halberd's really fun, and we spar a lot of low gear halberd. And not every weapon system is meant for It's hard to make a weapon system that everyone is going to love. And I think us who kind of like go toward the dagger route are okay with that kind of close quarters brutality. The okay that we're going to get spun down. I have a lot of people that are much smaller. Amy, who stays with us, I think she's like maybe 100 pounds soaking wet, like 5'2". She does dagger a lot too, but her game is mostly counter grappling and long range stabbing. She still does all the grappling aspects of it, but she knows she isn't going to run in there and then like pick up my leg and toss me to the ground and stab me. She knows that if I move in on her, she now knows how to counter that, because she's learned it and she's learned how to counter it. But we just kind of like throw them in there and make them spar a lot more with just knowing some of the basics, just because some of the techniques will not make sense out of context. So like the dirk, where we come around with the dagger on either side, for some people, they're like, that is a goofy kind of move. It's like, well, once you're past the basics of like, I can hit you, you can hit me, and now we're like parrying each other, now this is going to come into play of capturing the weapon arm and whatnot. So as a way of simplifying it for them, because it's like the main goal of a knife fight is I stab you to death and you don't stab me. The end. Everything else happened because that screwed up. I went to kill you and you stopped me. Okay, how'd you stop me? Well, I captured your arms. Now I'm going to have to counter that. Okay, that didn't work. Well, now I have to grapple you because now I'm on top of you. So it starts from here and works its way to a grapple. Or I'm a really crappy knife fighter, but I'm a really good wrestler. So how do I bridge that? By closing the gap and get you into my zone. So and if we have people who are going, oh, okay, we're going to be doing a lot of grappling here, we give them a lot of room and we have a lot more eyes on them to be able to go, whoa, stop. Just because, if they don't know what they're doing, we want to end it quickly. And if they don't know what they're doing, we tend not to let them do it. So Like, oh, I really want to grapple. It's like, that's great. He doesn't know how to fall down.
Yeah.
So we can't break people. But
On the one hand, keeping people safe by just or create this feeling of safety, because I know my instructors are having an eye on us. Nothing's going to happen to me. If someone's doing untoward stuff, like, they're going to stop them. And on the other hand, again, like giving people stuff to work with before you kind of throw them in. You kind of give them stuff that they can do, so they don't get into this kind of helpless anxiety mode, right?
well, right, and like that way they have keeping it as simple as possible. Of okay, we have like 4 basic angles to stab. Okay, you know how to like parry with your offhand. Okay, go play. All right, you're just going to do that. Hit the face mask. That's where I like to nickname it Tiny Rapier Days, because you're just like, oh, just parry and hit, parry and hit, parry and hit, and then if you can capture their weapon, cool, just stab them. And then that's what you're going to start at. And then eventually we're going to turn the knife around. You're going to learn that. But it's like allowing them to play with that. The more exposure they get to fighting with it, the longer they'll stay. It's the people who are like, oh, we're training this hard drilling, takedown, killing thing. It's like, no, we have lots of games. That was something I learned in the Filipinos. Stuff was to make things into different games. Like, okay, slashes don't count, only thrusts. Thrusts don't count, only slashes. Okay, only slashes on the neck, nothing else counts. You don't. One person has a weapon, one person doesn't. But you're immortal. But you have to get the weapon away from them. Like, draws out different aspects of the fight that you won't normally get if all your game is, all right, we're just going to go to kill. You'll get really good at doing that, but you won't get good at grappling them down. You won't get good at disarming them. You won't get good at what happens when we get into the mix. And separating those as little games, and then that way people will go, oh, we're going to start, both of us have hand on the weapon on our knees, and then we're going to go until someone gets killed by the dagger. Cool? All right, do that.
So gamification, in a way, makes it maybe to get this kind of thing in between the deadly association that we talked about, the realistic, so this is possibly a knife fight. No, this was a game I played.
Yeah. But,
what's your perspective on this? What do you think can be done to make people feel comfortable with training dagger instead of like putting away the long sword and picking up the dagger?
I agree. Take it slow, playful, nice and easy. Make games out of it. So it's the way to go, I think.
Yeah. I think all of the things that we talked about are like things that we should keep in mind. That's actively that's what's happening inside of people's heads. Like, watch out for reactions of students, like or my opponent if I'm a training partner, not my opponent. Like, he just froze. Was it because he just doesn't have a technique for that, or is it because he's just so uncomfortable that I kicked him into phase 3, basically? Watching out for stuff and making things transparent, I think, is pretty important. Like, so like, this might feel uncomfortable. Don't worry, it's weird to have a guy in your face like repeatedly stabbing at you, but like, we get to that. Don't worry. It's kind of like a thing here, like, so people don't feel like surprised by whoa, what is this? Why is there a guy stabbing me? So I think we just go like, this is what's going to happen, and this is how you might feel about it. Don't worry, just if this is too much, and as I said, some people just say, okay, this is too much for me. But give them that option in advance. Just say, if anything at any point gets too intense for you, check out, it's fine. Nobody's mad at you. It's like, this can be pretty tough. Acknowledging this is important thing. And I think, like, as I also said with the laughs of the jokes, like, the framing of it is pretty important. What I like to do is, first of all, I'm just a guy. I like to make jokes, I like to be silly, and that kind of sets a frame, but I also like to just do some music, put a silly song on in the background, that kind of takes out all of the honest, deadly associations that people might have. So I think there's a lot of just in the way that we set our class, we set the room,
It's the magic finger. No,
And you're still muted.
I'm muted also. That's good.
The finger doesn't help if you're muted.
The finger of silence. No. Yeah, but this reminds me also. I think that we should take into account, at least in the very beginning, when people don't know each other, because this is very often the case, that people don't know each other very well. So we should take size into account, because there's a psychological or a mental idea that if I am not very big and I get paired up with a big partner, that person is going to hurt me, and that person is going to be dangerous, because we are in the distance where the size matters. Whereas we talked about earlier, at long sword distance, it's slightly less relevant, but especially from the at least it feels less relevant, because in your face, when somebody's like this, there's a reason why. When I also used to work as a bouncer for a while, there's a reason that all the owners wanted the big guys. You know, the bigger the guy, the more they got paid. Almost, it is silly, but it's very much like that, because they really want somebody who's big. Yes, psychologically, it feels intimidating to come up to somebody's big, until you have somebody who knows what they're doing. They don't care. You know, once you've gone past that. But for the beginners, for the people who are just, once you hooked somebody, they stayed and done Dagger for 2 years. I don't think you have to worry about if they're going to leave immediately. That then something has to royally be screwed up, right? You built up your pedagogical capital, or but up until that point, I think you need to be mindful of this. I think, what's his name, Keith Farrell. I spoke to him about this, because in the beginning, when I was doing Dagger, I scared a few people in my club. They were clearly very uncomfortable, and he said, "Listen, I'm not a huge guy. And one of my least favorite things is to get paired up with somebody who's pretty big, and now we're going to do something that reminds me of wrestling. I don't think it's fun." And I'm like, yeah, you've had unpleasant experiences with this. And he's not a beginner in HEMA, He's had lots of these experiences. So I think this is one thing we need to be mindful of as instructors, that, don't you can try to gauge, of course, the fact that somebody's big doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to train with anybody, right? But you don't have to pair them up with the ones that size will be the most differentiating factor. Yeah.
At least until they kind of know each other well enough to
Yes,
play
yes,
with it, to make it
yes,
a game.
yes,
Like,
yes, yes.
you want to try on the big guy? Yeah, sure. It's without any feeling of risk or threat involved.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think what the very first thing that you kind of said was like, you pair people off, they don't know each other. I think that's also a very important thing. Coming back to the trust aspect of it, like I feel comfortable with going very intense with a few people at my club, or like have them demonstrate techniques on me, where like basically just boom, put to the ground, because we've done that a lot of times, and I know they're like good people, and they don't want to hurt me. So I think a lot of the stress and the anxiety of the thing can be taken out of the situation if that's not just that guy with the dagger in front of me, but that's Bob, and he has 2 cats and a kid, and he's like a loving parent, and he's got a face now, and he's a person, he's a human, instead of like this abstract threat in front of me. So I think getting people to at least, like with tiny bits of info, like at least to introduce themselves to new members before they start getting at each other and doing the techniques. I think that's also a very nifty thing to do. Kyle has the speaking finger.
Before I go, because I'm just about to jump out.
Yeah, I think we're going to
it's the what you just described there is kind of like how to put it. Okay, psychologically, if okay, this will be long-winded, but it'll get to the point. I like having people who have dressed up masks, different colored outfits, stuff like that, because I love the color range. I don't like the HEMA black. We should all be wearing black. But it helps psychologically, because it's like, your stereotypical 80s cyberpunk villain where everyone's wearing a black mask and it's easy just to gun them down. In competition, it's easy because it allows me to take off my governor of my engine and go, cool, go, smash, go, keep going. And that, what you're describing, is complete opposite. That's why, like, I at a competition, getting prepared to go do things, I don't talk to people because for a little while I need to just view them as a mask that I have to hit. So in session, though, yeah, everyone works with everyone. We make everyone train with everyone. Everyone's supposed to introduce themselves if you don't know them, and humanizing each other as much as possible as a way of preventing a injury, because you're not going to go hard on this person because you train with them. You know they don't know what they're doing, so you're going to go nice. Or you do know you can go hard with this guy because y'all go hard in training, so y'all are both like, all right, you good? And he's like, yeah, well, I'm good. Let's do this. So that kind of like introduce it, keep it a game, keep it force appropriate, keep it limited, is the only way you're going to keep people going through it, because it is more brutal in both training and in application than some other weapon groups. You know, if you have a really foily rapier and you wear all your protection, you may not even hardly feel anything, versus, okay, big wooden dowel rod just stabbed my ribs. So yeah, you gotta have to care a lot more and know that, and most of all, know that they care about you for you to feel comfortable enough to go in there. It's like, okay, Bjorn took me down, but I know Bjorn's not going to hurt me if we go to the ground, versus, okay, Ola's over here, and I don't know Ola, and Ola keeps trying to get my legs, and I'm like, I'm going to hurt him to get him off my legs because I can't trust what he's just about to do. So
You don't want him like within 4 meters of you.
I don't want him in halberd method, and like if I can fire one-handed and he gets hit, he's too close. That's what he deserves. But I have to go at that comment, so thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, I think this is
Perfect.
where we kind of
Yeah.
wrap it up. We've talked about the things that we actually that are going on, and we have talked about how to apply that in our lessons. So I guess this will go. But before you kind of start off, Kyle, like just quickly for the people watching this, who are you? Where can they find you if they want to like contact you for giving workshops and stuff?
So I am an instructor at Symbogi School of Western Martial Arts in Oklahoma, in the state of Oklahoma, in Oklahoma City, in the United States. If they want to get a hold of me, Facebook, contact the school. I also run a little sub website that's HEMA for All, where I do instructionals that I try to sell, and I also try to run around and do it. Spread the love of Dagger, wrestling, fighting in Krieg, close quarters, by like going out and doing training seminars and stuff like that, because you know I want people to fight more than just tag. So
Yeah, we will be in touch and put some of that in the description. Right. This is where I let you go.
thank you.
Right.
All right.
So
Bye-bye.
Bye.
let's continue with that round. Ola, like who are you? How can people find you if they want to find you, contact you, spar with you, get you as an instructor or whatever?
Well, I'm training at the same club as Björn.
But you have to speak more than that.
He doesn't have to. He can just put it on your shoulders.
In Wisby Historiska Fäktskola. That's the main place. Get there, train with me, get scared, scare me.
Yeah. So
I just to be clear, there's been a lot of jokes about Ola being scared, but he's actually one of the friendliest guys I know. So so don't
He's
go.
a cat. He can only be nice.
Yeah, don't,
otherwise,
don't-
we wouldn't be comfortable making these jokes,
No,
right? If
no.
we were actually scared. But he's more than 4 meters away from us now, so yeah. So Ola doesn't get to people; people get to Ola, right? They have to go to Visby, visit you, and find out what kind of a nice guy you are. Predrag, where can people find you? How do they get in touch with you if they want to book you for like wrestling or Dagger workshops or something?
Yeah, don't do that workshops that much anymore. More on the retiring side, because I think other people can go on. I've done enough for the last 15 years. So, but I still am available for some workshops on wrestling or maybe Dagger stuff. I train in Offenbach at Zornhau, so that's next to Frankfurt. Who doesn't know? And yeah, so just go on the webpage zornhau.de, and there you can find contacts for me or the other instructors we have. And
I think
yeah.
that the successor for you kind of retiring would be Bernd, right? Is that the...
Yes, well, Bernd is actually yeah, doing everything, but I think he's also the better instructor than I am. So yeah, that's
That's where he doesn't have time to join podcasts or whatever it is. Like,
and his English is not so good.
all right, good.
Yeah, that's the other reason and the
Yes,
time.
again, link for those people who don't know how to write Zornhau
Yeah.
or whatever will be in the description.
I think the next suppose I will wear his Zornhau t-shirt.
Yeah, you should.
But also, if you're doing HEMA and you don't know how to spell Zornhau, it means you're doing Italian HEMA.
Or English.
Or you're just not doing longsword because you just started by doing Dagger.
Yeah. Or you do Spanish.
Went to Dagger and then like.
Yeah. Or maybe doing Spanish things like destrezza, so on. Or I think is that Italian, French? I don't know. Or maybe, yeah. So there are some ways to avoid Zornhau, knowing the Zornhau, but not that many.
Good. So, yeah, we've already heard like Wisby Historical. I will not try to pronounce it.
Fencing school? It's not. Yeah. So we call it we call it Fäktskola, which is not to be confused with Fechtschule, which is of course a competition, right? Well, you can find me in Visby, of course, together with Ola, and you can reach me in Facebook. I'm available to find. It's just I'm called Little Björn because at some point that is one of my nicknames, and I started and still run the Medieval Dagger forum on the Facebook page, and so you can find me there. And I occasionally do teach some workshops, both domestically and abroad. And or you can just come to Visby, which is always a good idea. Everybody should come to Visby.
I don't think you have space for like 8 billion people.
No, okay, not everybody at the same time, but everybody else.
Yeah.
Everybody who does HEMA.
Okay.
And who like daggers. And who we like. It's narrowing it.
Okay.
And Jan, tell us about you.
Yes, my name is Jan Hoffman from Tremonia Fechten in Dortmund, Germany. You can either visit us in Dortmund. You can try to get a spot. Is that kind of get a spot at the Tremonia Fechtskola, which we do every year, which two of the three lovely people attending on my screen right now have been to. Or you can just try to find me on Facebook. It's Jan Hoff. And when you see the anthropomorphized otter with the Bowie knife, and that's me. Reach out if you just want to talk about stabby stuff or book me for a workshop. You know, that's how we do it.
And I must say, you just had your Tremonia Fechtskola last weekend, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I must just say, it's one of the nicest ones I've been to. You have both. I mean, especially the social part. I mean, the fencing stuff was good, everything, but and if it wasn't, I was an instructor there, so I could thank myself at least.
Everything.
Everything was good. No, but the social part, as I've told you before, I'm very impressed by the way you run it socially. What could have been a cringy sausage fest turned out to be one of the nicest evenings I had in a long time. So
the cringy sausage fest, like referring to like the typical HEMA men to women ratio, the alcohol involved, it's like
yes. Yeah, no. I mean, there was
as a bouncer on like, oh no, there's drinks with alcohol. How does this go?
Yeah. You know, I did that for a long time, and I've also been to many martial arts contexts outside of HEMA for a long time, and there tends to be a heavy overweight of men, and that in the combination with lots of alcohol has a tendency to bring out the worst in some men. And
Unless you built a great atmosphere.
unless you built a great atmosphere and went to Tremonia Fechtskola, where it didn't happen at all, there was nothing, and it was great. That was very impressive.
Yeah, talking about creating safe spaces and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so entirely flattered, I hereby declare this one over. So
All right.
if you would be so kind as to press that stop button.
I will.
See you in the next